Hello, and welcome to another edition of On the Town. On the Town is a series of interviews with leaders who are helping to make Southbury a great place to live, raise a family, own a business, and retire. I'm your host, Ed Edelson. Today's guest is Rudy Mazurosky, the publisher of Voices newspaper. Voices serves the town of Southbury, including Heritage Village, as well as many surrounding towns like Woodbury, Roxbury, Oxford, Middlebury, and many more. Rudy has been the publisher since 1989 and over the years has seen many changes in our community, the whole area of communications technology, and local journalism. In addition, Rudy has been a major volunteer to our community, especially through his involvement in the Tri-Berry Rotary and other local business associations. And I've been pleased to have Rudy as a good friend since I moved here in 2005, and we've had lots of great conversations. So it's a real honor today to have Rudy stop by and talk to us a little bit about his career and involvement in the Voices newspaper. Rudy, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting us.
And for those who've never really met you, maybe just heard the name, maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you're from and your education and how you got into journalism.
Well, I'm going to be 86 this year on the 29th of October this month. And going back about 78 years ago, I took over a newsstand in Portland, Oregon on 3rd Yamhill at age 7. And I sold the newspapers, the Oregonian, the Journal, the New York News, and the New York Mirror at that time. And had two routes that I had to deliver, and it was 7 days a week, but that was Depression time, so consequently everybody worked, including young fellas like me. And so that's where I got my start. And then years later, moved to San Francisco with a family, and after that was drafted into the Korean War.
Right.
And I came out of the Korean War, and the first thing I did is got a job on the San Francisco News. That was a Scripps Howard newspaper at the age of 21. And I was made the classified manager when I was 26. And then I was requested to come to New York to run the classified department of the World Telegram and Sun.
Wow.
And I had to give 3 months' notice to do that. And then after that, I was on the paper until we joined with the Journal American and the Herald Tribune. And the three papers got together, and they were on strike for 6 months. It lasted only about 6 more months. And then I stood up on a desk one day and closed the newspaper at the request of the publisher. And then shortly after that, I was hired as being ad director of the largest group of weekly newspapers in Michigan, the Observer Eccentric, and where we were for a few years. And then family called me back to the East. And so with my family, at that time 3, we came back to Elizabeth, New Jersey, the oldest newspaper in New Jersey, and a newspaper that was started by George Washington in the hills of Morris. And from that particular point, I stayed there for 10 years, and I had a wonderful publisher. His name was John Muscat, and he retired, came up to Heritage Village, and he asked me to join him with a new venture that he had, and it was Voices of the Village that he had acquired by the 4 people who ran it as an independent paper covering all of the 2,650 homes here in Heritage Village. And I joined him in 1980, and by that time the paper had grown to about 40 pages. But instead of being located in Heritage Village, it was moved to 1153 Main Street South in Woodbury, a building that we still own. It used to be a barn, And upstairs, we carried on. He carried on. And I joined him there, and then we moved a couple other places. And we tried to get that location approved for a building for Voices and Prime Publishers. And it took 9 years for me to discover that it was never going to happen. So we acquired the building land from the telephone company, surplus land, and we built the building that we now have. It took us 7 years to do it, but we've been there now for 8 years. And it's a beautiful building, and it has a lot of things that are very unique there. And we don't have to have a sprinkler system because we used concrete sheetrock inside and out. It's impervious to fire. You can put a blowtorch next to the wall for an hour, it won't go through. And so I had learned that from experience with the World Trade Center, because they saved $600,000 in the two buildings by not protecting the seal with concrete sheetrock. And when I told that to the fire marshal, he said, "That's wonderful. You do that, you don't need a sprinkler system." And then we discovered that we were a distance away from the Heritage Village water so that we could have our own water. So we went down 630 feet and got the best water in Connecticut at the newspaper. And so our employees take water home
Really?
because it's so perfect. In any event, we expanded from being just Southbury into Woodbury, and then to Oxford, and then to the different communities as we have been able to afford. Our newspaper is supported 100% by our advertisers. And when the advertiser calls us and says to us, we ask our customers, if I want to reach your neighbor, what paper should we use? Over 95% say Voices, and that continues to the day. A lot of community newspapers are going out of business because they suffer from lack of advertising. We have a complimentary newspaper that we want our readers to love because we're strictly independent, and we use journalism that I've acquired over these several decades. And that is, tell the truth, have no propaganda for any party, and be independent completely, and have letters to the editor that are above reproach. We confirm every letter to the editor, as you may know, and we restrict it to one letter to the editor a month and 300 words. And if somebody makes a declarative statement, they say, this happened, we ask them for the source and we check the source. And everything in our newspaper is the way it should be and had been in the past. And when we continue that practice, that's why we hope that Prime Publishers and Voices, and we acquired the Town Times in '92 from Oakville and Watertown, and we've expanded into Thomaston and the Waterbury area of Bunker Hill. So now we now reach, Voices reaches 100,000 people, and the Town Times 50,000 people. And from what I understand, they love the paper, and they continue to make it possible for us to exist and stay in the community. And we hope we'll always be able to do that.
Well, you covered almost every question I could think of, so it could be a short interview. But I would like to go back. One quick question. So originally, the paper, when you started with John, was focused just on the village, or
That's right.
all Southbury?
No, when he acquired the paper, it was just on the village.
And then when did you begin to think about a wider area? When did that happen?
Well, John Muscat was a very experienced publisher. He was the publisher of the Ansonia Sentinel, and he was also in Claremont. He was the publisher. He was the publisher in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I had an opportunity of working with him in all sides of the business. And he asked me to set up his rate cards and everything. I did that from afar, And then he asked me to join him and live longer. He said, if you get out of the get out of the area of that I was in, and he was in Elizabeth, New Jersey, metropolitan area, and so consequently, he was right. I'm living longer, I think, because now I'm going to be 86.
Doing good.
And I helped him stay alive. He had a very bad, his health was in bad shape when he was up here. And Mary Jane, he passed away in 85, and Mary Jane Muscat, an angel, passed away in 89. And she was our editor, and she was my co-publisher at that particular time.
So about how many people work for Voices? Well, I should say Prime Publishing, because you get the two newspapers, as you mentioned.
Prime Publishers has about 47, 48 employees.
And most of them, or all of them, work in the building on Heritage Way.
Well, we have another office in Watertown.
Oh, okay.
And so at the Town Times personnel, that's where they're at for the most part. And we bought the building in, I guess, about in 98, I believe it was. And now it's a very pretty standalone building. It's a curiorized type of building and if you ever go by it, take a look. It's on the corner, and it looks exactly like a newspaper should for a community.
Right out of a Norman Rockwell painting.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people, I think, do get confused by the term publisher versus printing. Now, you don't do the printing. That's farmed out. Has that always been the case?
Always been the case.
And has it changed over the 30 plus years?
You should never, for a local publisher, in order to have a press, you have to have about let's see, what used to be 20 press schedules a week. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you can't afford the press, and you can't afford the personnel to run it. So we've always been a good customer of the printing company, and we treat them like a part of the newspaper, because they are. Mm-hmm. And so consequently, right now we're with Trumbull Printing in Trumbull, and they do a beautiful job, and they've been very good partners with us. And we have our newspaper is picked up at Trumbull Printing by a supplier that we have had for years, and takes it to each of the post offices for delivery that day. We're a requester paper, which means that more than 50% of the people who read our paper must specifically request our paper, and we do that with cards every 3 years. That gives us preferential treatment by the post office. So requester periodical, and so we're treated as though we were first-class mail.
Very good. So I would say the process of putting a paper together for each edition is drastically different today than it was 30 years ago, because of not only the computer, word processing, graphical layouts, but also just your ability to send stuff electronically back and forth. But maybe you might describe a little bit of what it was like to put a newspaper together back in 1989, because I think some people might have forgotten how labor-intensive it was. At least that's my impression.
When I first got in the newspaper, the union journeyman was considered to work on one standard large size, we're a tabloid, but let's figure twice the size. One of those per day is one person. That's all they could do, because they worked with lead on a turtle, and they had to put the page together. It was absolutely ingenious, because they had to be able to read backwards and forwards, and they were incredible. That's why it took 7 years to be a journeyman. But now it's so that the average person can put out about 25 pages a day. So that helps big time, and everything is electronic, and we can put color on every page, and it's a beautiful process. And we're a paper that still has proofreaders, and we have most of the legal advertising from the communities that we cover, because you cannot make a mistake in a legal without causing a lot of problems for the town and the attorneys of the town. So consequently, we have proofreaders, and we do a marvelous job, they tell us, of making sure that we read every legal for sense and for the content as well, so that if somebody's using a day and date, we make sure that they're right in giving us the legal advertising. So, but that's a part of our service to the community, is making sure that when you see a legal notice in our paper, it is accurate, and you can bet your money on it.
Well, I'm sure, well, I know you know the expression, if it's not in voices, it didn't happen. Did I get that right?
Yes, we were at a restaurant, my partner and I, John Muscat, we were sitting in a booth in Woodbury, and two ladies were sitting at the counter, and one raised her voice. She says, "It didn't happen." And the other one said, "What do you mean it didn't happen?" She said, "If it happened, it would have been in voices. It wasn't in voices, it didn't happen."
There you go. That's reality.
That's reality.
That's how we know
So
it's reality.
we enjoyed that, and that's something that we tell our reporters and editors. You make sure that everything that happens locally is in the paper. We depend upon that with our readers. They depend upon us being accurate and covering all the local news.
Now, as you know better than I do, although we have voices here for the towns that you serve, many communities are finding themselves without such a newspaper to record what's happening locally.
Unfortunately, that's the way. Last year, the country lost 200 local newspapers, and that is a terrible thing for a democracy, because you have to have people checking facts and knowing what's going on, and people have to know what's going on, and having reporters at meetings to give the truth of what's happening. And if it is now with a number of newspapers that have one reporter for 2 or 3 communities, and they get their news from the minutes of meetings, which are basically biased, depending upon who is providing the minutes. And we make sure that we cover the meetings not only with our reporter notes, but also recording them, so that if we're ever challenged by anybody, we are able to produce the evidence that we have accuracy in our reporting. And that's an essential part of having a local newspaper. And unfortunately, there's going to be even greater numbers of newspapers going out this year because of the fact that they have to go through the expense of paper, press, ink, delivery to the post office, and the postal cost itself. And that represents about 75% of the cost of putting out a local newspaper.
So if you were asked to give advice to some of those newspapers, or maybe put it another way, what's the magic sauce that Voices has that seems, from everything I know, to be stable? It's going to be with us for years to come. What's the secret recipe that you think you've used that others have missed?
The only thing that you can do to make sure that you survive is a newspaper has to be trusted, has to have local news, and has to be delivered on time, and is very dependable, and make sure that people in town and the businesses know that you're not supported by government. You're the watchdog. You're not supported by government. You're supported by the advertising that appears in the paper. And it's essential that the advertising be effective. And therefore, the personnel on a newspaper that has to do with advertising must be able to counsel the advertisers as to the elements of advertising that will produce results. Local newspapers cannot not afford to have people run advertising and not be successful. And if an ad appears to be a turkey, you tell them it's a turkey, you're taking your money, throw it in the middle of the street. It will not produce results. Local newspapers have to produce results for their customers, which is the advertisers. Once they do that, then the advertisers will expand and to refer other advertisers to the publication. But you got to do the first things first, and that is make sure that whatever advertising you're able to convince will be effective in the paper, you produce results for them by counseling them. There are many ways we do that. If it's a new business, we always ask the merchant or whoever the advertiser is, your customers come back? Do they repeat? If they're a long time in thinking about it, they're not ready to advertise. There's something wrong with it within the company itself or the retailer. So consequently, we counsel people on making sure that the advertising is effective. And we have 14,000 commercial accounts at Prime Publishers. Wow. 14,000. And I wish they all would advertise at the same time, but they're seasonal. And when they need advertising, they call us, and we help them with that advertising.
Okay. So when you look back on those 30 years, or I guess it's 30 years now as the publisher, any particular anecdotes that you would like to leave with us as far as memorable moments?
Well, one of the memorable moments was when we several years ago we got a call from ShopRite in Norwalk, and I didn't want to waste the time of a representative because box stores are historically very, they only go with the dailies and they only go with this or that, and they won't give a community paper a shot. So we have a very good salesman that was going to go down there, and it's going to take about 5 hours for the round trip and be with them.
Sure.
And I said, well, I'll go. I'll waste my time. So I went to Norwalk, and at the ShopRite store, was about twice as big as the one at Southbury, and they ushered me to the second floor, and there were about 13 or 14 people around an oval table, and there was a gentleman on the side. He happened to be the owner of 9 ShopRites, and he was peppering me with questions, and the questions were the perfect questions. Are you an independently audited newspaper? Yes, we are. Do you have local stories in every one of your communities? Yes, we do. Do you get the legal advertising for most of your towns? Yes. And on and on. And I said, I should pay you for these questions because it's exactly what businesses should be asking of their publication. And so consequently, I said, I have one question for you. Why did you call the paper? And he said, because we had our customers answered the question, if we want to reach your neighbor, what paper should we use? And I said, isn't that wonderful? That's exactly what we hope.
I'm sorry, the answer was voices?
And the answer was voices by 95%. We even did it twice because we couldn't believe it. And we did it also for your other paper, the Town Times. And they had 85%. And that was, we don't even have a store in Watertown, but we have 500 customers a week from Watertown. So he said, well, we'll let you know. I said, well, could you let me know how to get back to voices the easiest way? I took 95 the first way. He says, yeah, we'll do that. So it took me about an hour to get back to the paper, an hour and 15 minutes, go up Route 7, 84, into the paper. I walk in the door, and our Jim Scully, who's a representative, said to me, what am I supposed to do? I said, what are you talking about? He said, the agency for ShopRite called me, wants to run a full page in the Wednesday paper. I said, no, they're going to think about it. He says, Rudy, they just called and wanted to run an ad in the Wednesday paper. And I said, well, we don't have the space, right? I said, you got to get it for them. And So I talked to the editor. We broke in the space and we read it on Wednesday. And he said, but they also want to run their inserts with us every week in both papers. And so I said, oh my gosh, yes, that's fine. And they've been with us ever since, and they're now the number one store of grocery store in Southbury. And they have delivery as well. And they're wonderful people. They're family people, as we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of family, yeah, as you mentioned, it is a family business, and I know that it is your intention and hope that your family will take over from you when you finally decide someday that this isn't what you want to do with your days. I can't imagine that's going to ever happen. But anyway, when it does happen, what's the legacy you would like to leave for your family as they take over Voices into the future?
Well, one of the wonderful things that I learned is never trust government, because if you have an estate and you pass away, your heirs have to pay the taxes on it immediately. Usually you're forced to sell your property or your farm or what have you. So years and years ago, I bought a policy and put it in the name of the kids. I have 4 kids, and it's in their estate. And now, if I were, and my wife, seconded I, pass away, they have enough money to pay the taxes, so they'll own the newspaper free and clear, and that's a wonderful thing to do, and I advise that for everybody, because there was a point at which, several years ago, a lot of people who have a business will remember that the inheritance tax was eliminated at the federal level. And so consequently, my kids said, you don't have to buy that insurance anymore. I said, remember, don't trust government. They can change on a dime. And I learned that from the Depression. So the Depression days, the people I met about their experiences. So we continue with the insurance. So consequently, if that were to happen, our 4 children will continue to be primary recipients of the newspaper, and they all have very important jobs at the paper. My daughter is our chief financial officer, and she's got a world of experience even before she joined Prime Publishers. And my son, Kurt, is our operations director and editor of executive editor of the Town Times. He has been one of the top scholars for Ivy League schools in his ability to, as a wordsmith. He was, before he joined Prime Publishers, he was the editor of World Copy and Tea magazine. And then my youngest daughter is our person who answers the phone and does 1,000 different jobs. And my youngest son is our classified and circulation manager. So we're in good hands, and that's the reason why I could steal away today and be with you, Ed,
Okay.
for this program. And
Well, but I want to put a fine point on that. When legacy, I was thinking of what principles, what guidelines do you hope that they'll follow with the newspaper? If you had to tell them, always remember these 3 or 5 things that have been core to your philosophy about the way you've run the business, run the paper. Yeah, do a few things come to mind?
well, yes, these are just good, logical things for newspapers that have to keep in mind. Is never be in a position where you have to kowtow to an advertiser or government or anybody. You cannot. You have to be strictly independent.
Okay.
Now, that's the way it has to be. And we counsel our editors to make sure that our reporters are not propagandists for any party. They have to stick to the news and never editorialize. That's why we don't have editorials. We have letters to the editor, which we police, and I mentioned that before, but we've had every once in a while, we'll hire a reporter that is not as clean as we want them to be. They have to be completely nonpartisan. And we've had a couple. I remember the one that we had in the Town Times, and they should know that if they're partisan, the other party will tell us about it. That's what happened to us. And so we confronted this one person, and we said, "I'm terribly sorry, but you can't work here." "Why not?" "Well, you're on the town committee for that this party." And we said, "I'm terribly sorry, but you can no longer work here." We let them know in advance, of course, of hiring anybody, that they have to be strictly independent. That's essential for people to trust the newspaper. And if you are not a propaganda organ, people trust you, and they know that they're receiving something that is very important to them. Recently, about a year ago now, I got a call from the first selectman of Monroe. "Why?" He said, "Mr. Mazurosky, you have circulation in Monroe, and not that much, but we'd like to have you expand it. We just lost the Monroe Courier. They're out of business, and you're the type of newspaper we desperately need. So now we're the official newspaper of Monroe. We've expanded our circulation. We couldn't go on 100% because Monroe is as large as in population as Southbury, but at least we're giving them local news, which we're doing, and we depend upon the area to support the local news with advertising, and when that happens, we can expand the circulation in Monroe. But that's how you expand. You cannot be like the puppy that has a bone in his mouth, looks in the stream, sees the puppy with a bone in his mouth, and then drops it, because we're dependent upon advertising. We have to be able to produce the newspaper next week, and next month, and next year, and we have to concentrate on the economy of scale. So we will continue to expand into other communities as long as it can be supported with advertising.
Well, I would say, Rudy, maybe it's because it's the fall season and football is around. I think what you're expressing is the importance of the fundamentals of blocking and tackling. The newspaper needs that independence, but advertising that works, and good journalism, and all three of those have to kind of work together in order to be successful. So I want to thank you very much for stopping by and giving us a little insight to how the contribution that you've made over the years through Prime Publishing and its newspapers, the Voices as well as Town Times, and wish you another 30 years working on the newspaper. So thanks for stopping by.
I would mention the fact that nothing could happen without your loyal personnel, and we've had so many of our personnel have been with us for more than 30 years, and that they're essential to us. And today's paper that you're going to receive will have our fall home improvement and garden guide and a coupon book, and we expect you to enjoy it. And it's right here.
There's the coupon book. Whoop, there's the coupon book.
Yep. And we have
the fall
home garden guide.
Yeah, see if we've got that up there. Great. Whoop, there you go. All right. Well, again, thank you so much.
And then we have ShopRite.
Yeah, of course, ShopRite, which is a great story about.
We have the other inserts, True Value.
It's a real testimony that the advertisers are coming to you, as opposed to you having to go to the advertisers.
Well, we do go to the advertisers.
I know, but I mean, in that particular example, that's a real
sure.
honor that ShopRite sought
sure.
you out, as opposed to the typical other way that I know about sales and advertising. So thank you to all of our viewers out there for watching us on the Town, and stay tuned for future editions of On the Town when we'll talk to other leaders who are making Southbury a great place to live. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much. It was wonderful, and I learned a lot, which is what I like doing this. Is that although I think I know some stories, I only know half the story. Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story.